been in the packaging space for, as I say, way too long. Coming up about 14 years, and through that time I've worked in different roles, from manufacturing to sales and marketing, and more recently adding a sustainability element into my role. And I guess that's been the evolution of my role. Has almost been the evolution of the packaging space. So packaging previously has always been about the product itself, but then fast forward to today, we've evolved to making sure packaging and sustainability are intertwined. And so a lot of my role today is making sure that sustainability and the sustainable elements within the packaging spaces are talked about and have a voice within that space. Oh, that's a good question. The spark really almost came as a bit of an evolution of just my day-to-day interactions out there in the marketplace. A few years ago, I started hearing more and more customers and brands and organisations, as well as the wider market, asking for more sustainable packaging. And at the time, I didn't have all the answers, or I didn't have a good understanding of it. And so I took it upon myself to try and engage in that space, and what started as a bit of a curious process to help customers in the markets and those particular brands ended up becoming a really good learning curve, and turned that spark into something that both interested me and combined the business part of the packaging world. And so I've just pretty much kept that momentum going, and if anything, the more I've learned about sustainable packaging, the less I know, which I think is a great thing in this particular space. The current trends in packaging at the moment. I think the current packaging trends that I am seeing, hearing and learning about is geared around designing out waste, is one of them. Another trend that continues to rise is the process or the concept of a circular economy. So making sure that your packaging or the product that you're producing can be circular in that model. The other trend that is continuing to rise is the rise of recycled content in a lot of packaging. And I think with that there is becoming a better understanding of what packaging, in particular plastics, its role it plays in that space. And so what I'm starting to like, or at least see across the spectrum of packaging world and industry in the market, is an eagerness to understand packaging across all its forms. So from trying to measure it correctly, to trying to understand its carbon footprint, to understanding its recyclability. So I think that trend of just understanding packaging amongst everything else is one of the trends that is continuing to grow and get great momentum. The biggest challenges that companies face, I think it's just getting started. There is a real fear of getting it wrong. And if I've learned anything in this space, personal experience and watching other brands take on this journey, is just getting started. And often what's holding them back is this fear of getting it wrong, but also the fear of trying to get the perfect packaging. And what that does is it basically paralyzes you from doing any action. And when it comes to sustainable packaging and sustainability in general, the littlest of actions can actually create great momentum and progress across all of the sustainable strategies and plans you have. So that seems to be the biggest challenge, but at the same time it's also the biggest opportunity. options, alternatives, the whole 9 yards. I always get organisations to start with their purpose and their why, and it sounds very cliche, but the reality is when a brand understands its own purpose, and it doesn't necessarily need to be aligned with purely just sustainability, but if you're clear on your purpose and your why, you have a better chance of growing the sustainability part of that strategy. So I always recommend just getting really clear on why you're going on this journey. I think the challenge is many organisations face is where do you start, and often start with your why. And if you start there, that often gives you clues into how you should tackle your sustainability plans, your sustainability targets, and your strategies, which in today's world should all be intertwined with your overall business strategy and your purpose. I think there's no one big innovation as such. I think there's the innovation, or I'm going to put it down as a movement of better understanding of packaging and the role it plays within the wider scope of the waste world, the branding world, the business world, and the innovations that are coming out of understanding that complexity is a mix of innovations that fall into different categories. So for example, instead of looking at it from a purely material perspective, organizations and brands in the markets are looking at it at a holistic perspective. And the good thing about that is that you include different partners, supply chain, you get better collaboration. So I think that's the biggest innovation that I'm seeing in this particular space. People are still concerned and looking at the material, but at the same time you're looking at that from a wide perspective, which I think you can have a greater impact from an innovation perspective. I think the evolution, I should say, of packaging in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be incorporated a lot more in the legislation, and governments and organisations are going to have to adhere more to those changes, and we're seeing that now, and we have been seeing some of those changes come into play. So there's going to be more accountability in that space, and more regulation, which is a good thing. And I think packaging and brands and organisations will be collectively responsible alongside other parts of the supply chain. And I think the overall trend is that there's going to be more awareness and more transparency in that space, which means if you are a brand looking to talk about packaging or sustainability in general, I think the important thing is to be able to share that journey in a transparent way, but also in an authentic way, in a way that you're able to tell the story truthfully. Honestly, not much. And I say that with a lot of respect to that innovation. There's a lot of moving parts and complexities when it comes to bioplastics or edible solutions in that sense, and really any innovation in that space. And the reason I say that is because I always take a look at it and kind of go, how's the impact across the supply chain? What does that look like from a waste perspective? Because not every waste stream can take bioplastics or break down in the manner that it's supposed to break down in. So I think in the stage that we are currently, there's limited opportunities for a lot of those innovations to actually have the outcomes that are required. That's not to say that they'll have a big part. I think what will likely happen is that they will be part of a wider system which will have a mix of solutions that are aligned to the waste streams or the government changes and legislations within that country or region. The short answer is it forces brands and organisations, manufacturers, supply chains, the whole shebang into making that change. So I think the legislations and the changes that government make at that level has a direct flow-on effect, and that's a good thing. Again, it forces people to look into that, and if you have timelines and you have dates that problematic packaging might be phasing out of, it creates urgency at the same time. So I think it's a good thing in that it gives businesses, organisations, and as I mentioned, the whole supply chain opportunity to move towards those particular deadlines or changes. I think from a New Zealand perspective, the best way to keep up to date is through the Ministry for the Environment. They've got a lot of changes already publicised in that space, and so heading towards that link and that website and understanding that the waste strategies evolved around that will give you a really good understanding of what changes are upcoming. I think the main one that I see that is relevant to our particular industry is the tranche 3 phasing out of problematic packaging moved out a year, which involves the likes of PVC packaging. So that would be one to, if you aren't already making strides or starting that journey, I would recommend doing that, mainly because the tranche 3 or that particular change is quite complex, so understanding the impact can actually take quite a while. So don't leave it to the last minute, but certainly go on to the Ministry for the Environment to check out those changes and that the government are making in place. Packaging differs between different sectors and markets based on their needs. So in short, each market has got certain requirements and regulations, and packaging needs to adhere to those standards. So for example, when it comes to food, you want to make sure that you can make sure that the food arrives and is packaged according to food safety standards and produced according to food standards, and you have certain processes that those that are delivering or supplying it adhere to those. And similarly with the health and medical sectors, they are also bound by certain rules within that space. So again, being aware of what those are. When it comes to other sectors, they may not necessarily have the same structural framework or regulation that, say, food and the medical sector has, but I would say adhering to the overall waste systems. So is packaging recyclable, curbside, does that packaging have a waste stream to go to? So for the likes of retail and e-commerce, those questions I would pose with your packaging suppliers versus, say, food and medical, where you want to make sure that it's within the regulations of those markets. I think the very first step is definitely make sure that you're on this journey for the right reasons. Be prepared to invest time and resources into it. I think if you are tackling this journey from a knee-jerk reaction, you may get some short-term wins, but the long-term scenario is going to be very hard for you. So a couple of quick strategies I would employ is making sure you understand your purpose from a business perspective, where you sit in the marketplace, understanding where your products go after they've been used or consumed, and then secondly, creating a strategy within the organisation, whether that's for your management team or the leadership team, and making sure that from a business perspective, everybody's on the same page and has the same agenda and the same goals and targets. And then from there, you're able to set out clear direction and activity in accordance to those particular strategies. I think the short answer to that is simply tell your customers and your marketplace that you're going on this journey. I think all of a sudden just turning up and all of a sudden overnight you've got this awesome strategy and you're doing all these wonderful things can sometimes feel a little bit knee-jerk or have almost somewhat a greenwash effect. So the best way to communicate is just tell people that you're going to go on this journey and be transparent in that journey, in the sense of sharing how you're looking to start this, what some of the hurdles might be, share those challenges with your community, because at the end of the day, a brand and an organisation doing that is actually, weirdly enough, going to get a lot more loyalty if you just take your customers and your market on that journey and tell them and walk them through as much as you can about your journey. That there is a silver bullet or a silver bullet material that can just be applied and used across everything. That tends to be a common theme that comes across. The other one that often comes my way is that all plastics are bad. And disclaimer, we supply plastic packaging, but I think the better framework around understanding if packaging, or specifically plastic packaging, is bad is understanding why it is bad and what its role is in that particular product that it might be protecting or being used for. Because again, not all packaging or all plastic packaging is bad, as I talked about with medical and food markets. The role that packaging or plastic packaging plays in some of those areas is to actually keep the food safe, keep it away from getting contaminated, or in the medical field, plastic packaging is used to make sure that you don't have issues of contamination of samples or diseases getting cross-contaminated across different labs or as it's getting delivered. So sometimes plastic packaging actually has a really good role to play. So I agree that plastic is everywhere, but not all plastics are bad. I think the consumer today is a lot more educated and informed about a brand's packaging stance and how they communicate it. So I would say that it is very important for a brand and an organisation to have a sustainable strategy first and foremost, and if it requires sustainable packaging, then I would say make sure you include that in your overall strategy, because customers are wanting to make decisions based on if a brand is doing good for the environment, and packaging is only one part of that. but it's also one of the more tangible processes or tangible products where a customer can actually relate physically to your brand. So involving your sustainable packaging in your brand is really important, because it will create that awareness for customers, and therefore potential to create loyalty in that space. Well, the short answer is customers and consumers have the money. They ultimately pay or decide through their wallet. So that's the big incentive if you are a brand going on that journey, is to make sure that it aligns with those consumers, those markets, because ultimately if it does, there is a higher chance that those customers and those consumers will buy your products. When I think you're starting out and you're looking at different options, don't be afraid to look at everything. Because if you've never looked at alternative materials, or you've never looked at the current materials that you're currently using, then be open to looking at all the alternatives. What I would recommend and suggest through that process is just making sure that you've got a really good framework of understanding each material, and be prepared to look at it from a balanced perspective, so the pros and the cons, because each material will have benefits that the other materials may not have, and vice versa. So don't be closed on one material, be open to all materials, and then have a framework in which you can assess those materials equally. I think the obvious one is to make sure that with your current packaging supplier that you are using or are getting your packaging from, is to talk to them about what their sustainable solutions are, or strategies and materials that they may have, because often most organisations and suppliers are already going through that process. So initially working with your current suppliers. Secondly, I would try to collaborate and partner up with the waste side of things, or the waste part of the system. And the reason why I say that is because the better you understand how your packaging flows through the waste system, the better understanding you'll be able to have in terms of communicating if this is the right packaging for that customer or for that brand. So collaborating and partnering up with the waste services, the infrastructures that are in and around it, understanding the recycling process, understanding that waste system will give you a better understanding of if that material is good for the system or bad for the system. Lastly, I would say collaborate and partner with like-minded people in that space. Often when it comes to sustainability in general, let alone packaging, it can be quite a lonely space, and there are lots of organisations out there that are embarking on this journey. So if you can create a community where people can talk about their challenges and their problems and the opportunities, and sharing that knowledge, the better we are for the whole environment as well as a community in that space. So find organisations you can talk to and share your journey, and that will always and that will also provide information and guidance in that space. It's a big question. The long and short of it is, it's important because it impacts all of us, right? Packaging is only a tiny portion of the challenges we face in sustainability today, and so I think if you can make make little positive changes in this space, it has massive flow-on effects around the supply chain. And I'm a big believer in that. I'm a big believer in progress over perfection. And when it comes to sustainable packaging, there is a tendency to try and find the perfect material. And the reality is there is no perfect material. There is no silver bullet. If you can find materials based on the systems that work around it, you have a better chance of making a bigger impact. So in the long run, trying to work towards packaging, sustainable packaging that encompasses all of the supply chain, you have a better chance of making a bigger impact, and packaging will be in a better place for it, as well as the wider communities that it serves. I think the final thing to remember through here, and when you're embarking on a sustainable journey and going through packaging changes, is to be prepared to evolve. I think as technology, new innovations arrive, new waste streams are grown or invented, that being prepared to shift your packaging to even a better solution is, you have to be open to that at the same time. So just because you may have solved something now doesn't mean it'll be the solution in 5, 10, 20 years. So take sustainable packaging as a continuum and a evolution that evidently doesn't stop, it just keeps evolving, much like technology, much like any innovation and market in the world. We've just got to keep innovating, and I think if you take that concept, then you'll be in a better position moving forward for the future.